Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the D-Shift podcast. And because it's February, we're talking about new relationships. We're talking about maybe getting out of old ones, or maybe trying to still decide if you should stay in a marriage or if it is time to go. I have an expert to help us with those questions and also with improving our ability to participate fully in future relationships. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Lee Baucom. He is an amazing individual. I've been looked at his website. I've been reading some stuff that he's participated in sharing and doing all kinds of things, and just a phenomenal resource. So I'm going to make sure I get this right. I've got a card. So Lee is the creator of the Save the Marriage System. He's an author of 7 books. He has his own podcast, and he's also got something new called the Unpause app, which we definitely want to make sure we talk about. So Lee, welcome.
Hi, Marcy. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, and it's great to have you because, like I say, I think this is the perfect time of year to kind of get thinking about new relationships or improving existing relationships. Before we get into all that good stuff, though, why is this your area of focus, Lee?
So I was going to be training as a therapist. I knew that. And it took me a while to figure out why I got into this area, why marriages. And really it goes back to my childhood of watching not my immediate family. My parents are still in their 80s and happily married. Not my grandparents. They had successful marriages too, but watching extended family, watching my uncle go through 5 or 6 marriages, watching another aunt go 3, another one I'm not sure, and watch the damage. You know, my grandparents going through the hurt of that, watching my aunts and my uncle go through that, watching my cousins, some of which I have lost contact with because they split from the family, they divorced the family even, and I just saw multiple levels, multiple generations of impact of that, and thought, you know, if there's a better way, when a marriage can be saved. To how do you do that? What are the resources to get you there? And so that kind of spurred me on.
Yeah. And it is so true that divorce is between a couple, but the ripples of divorce can go through the whole family. It can even impact a community. It's certainly, I know I'm from Canada, but now live in Texas, and I'm in a very religious part of Texas. And where divorce is not in the particular religion, divorce is kind of frowned upon. I mean, it's not outright prohibited or anything, but it is frowned upon. And in some religious communities, divorce can really polarize the whole community, especially in smaller areas.
Well, and for sure, I mean, the polarization, even their churches or places of worship, but there's also, we have friends at a gym. When they split, they had to choose who was going to stay, who's going to go with friends. What friends are they going to stay with, and who's going to have to choose sides? And so, yeah, the ripple effect is there. That doesn't mean that there isn't a place for divorce. And that's one of the questions I often get since I do the Save the Marriage thing is, so do I think that every marriage should be saved? And the answer is no. But I do think that it's important to think hard because many times when people are in pain, which is when they're even thinking about that question, they don't think about all of the effects. And it's kind of like, you know, if you hit your hand with a hammer, the only thing you're aware of is that hand. Nothing else around you matters in that moment. So the pain focuses you on, I want to get out of pain. Right. Not so much, how do I get out of pain? And so sometimes the answer is, I just leave. And maybe that's not the only answer.
Right. And to be honest, as a divorce coach, that's my first question to my clients is, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Because if you're not, let's not spend all that time and energy and money, because it's going to cost you like probably $5,000 to $10,000 right off the hop, and you're not getting that money back. So let's make sure that that's really what you want to do, with the proviso that, you know, if there's abuse or if there's other issues where there's the safety of yourself or your children, then that's kind of that's a non-negotiable for me until you're in a safe situation to make that decision. So let's start at the very beginning. So Lee, why do you think, or what are some of the common reasons why marriages get into trouble in the first place, where one or both people are thinking about getting out?
So let's do a bracketing because you've already leaned into it. There's the bracket of I married a toxic person, truly a toxic person, right? That's the abuse and the danger part. So let's set that aside
Yeah.
and let's go with kind of common, ordinary, everyday marital problems.
Right.
And we'll stick with that because those are not the ones that I want to focus on. So let's go with the main. What I watched for years was this thing that happened. People would fall in love and they would decide that they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. And so they have this little ceremony to commit to that. And then they return to life. And so all of the, courtship, that there's a lot of energy we invest in that.
Right.
And I think there's a subconscious piece where we go, okay, now I've got to get back to life. I've got to get back to whatever, job, maybe kids, maybe travel or hobbies or friends or whatever. And so what most people end up doing is hitting what I call the pause button. They hit the pause button and think in their minds they will get back to us at some point in the future. It's like going into suspended animation. We'll just put the marriage down and we'll do the parent thing, or I'm going to go for a partner or whatever promotion I need, or whatever it is that gets me to the place where I go, whoo, okay, we have breathing room, now back to us.
Right.
And so they hit the pause button and go do their thing, not noticing that relationships can't be paused. There is no suspended animation for that. I always think about, in the science fiction movies where they're going out into space and they just put people to sleep.
Right.
When they get there, they revive them, right? And everything starts right where they were.
Right.
And that even though we can't do that in real life, at least in the movies it works, it just doesn't work in a relationship where you're either growing and expanding or you're shrinking and dying. And so they hit the pause button, not aware of that. And the cascade of that is where we see what oftentimes people say, oh, this is what ended my marriage. And they're really talking about symptoms of the disconnection. We have this need for connection that's so deep within us. And when we have that disconnection, we experience it. I mean, they've done the research that the brain experiences that as physical pain when we have that disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And so we feel like that desperation to find it. And that leads us to looking elsewhere, whether it's investment in job or investment in kids or investment in an outside person or wherever to try to get that feeling.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because I do see people who are, and to kind of even pull it into the real, even if you don't have kids, you might say, well, I'm going to forgo all my holidays for the next 10 years to work my way up the corporate ladder. And then lo and behold, you retire. And the next day, you get sick and you're not able to enjoy any of those things. So I completely understand that putting the pause button, how that could destroy what you've already built or what you were, the momentum that you had going forward.
Yeah. And so what often happens in that process is one person kind of wakes up before the other one does to this. They're out of suspended animation, so to speak, and they go, oh my gosh, who is this person? I have a stranger.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times early in my career I would have people say, I thought we were okay. I thought when we retired, we would just get back to us. We would travel the world. We would, whatever it was. And now my spouse says, I don't know who you are. We're strangers passing in the night. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I mean, all of these indicators of we disconnected so thoroughly that I don't have a connection with you anymore.
Right. And so maybe I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, Lee, and that's certainly not my intention. So you can just ignore this question if you prefer to. But when you're saying this, because I work mostly with women. Now, I do work with some men. I just find I tend to get more women in the divorce coaching world. But I often hear women say that they feel their partners, their husbands, have emotionally disconnected from them to pursue earning an income or getting a promotion or starting a business or whatever. And, maybe that's a bit of a generational thing because a lot of the women I work with, are in their 50s, 60s and up. But do you think that disconnect or that suspended animation is more men do that? Or is it kind of a mutual thing? Both genders do it equally? Or what are your thoughts?
So it used to be I would see it more frequently at the beginning of my career. I've been doing this now for 3 decades. So long time, have a lot of changes in society.
Things have changed, sure.
And in the beginning, I would see the men hitting the pause button to go do the job thing,
Right.
and women hitting the pause button to do the parent thing.
Parenting thing. Yeah.
That is less and less the case. I see more women who are like, no, I want to get to this certain point where I've got this success, and
Sure.
more men who are joining into the, okay, now it's time for us to be mom and dad, not husband and wife, right? So it's less and less that, and I think perhaps the sensitivity is different. That I think sometimes men can maybe compartmentalize a little bit more.
Right.
So they're sometimes a little slower to catch on that things are that damaged. But no, I think either can do it. It just
Sure.
depends on what's going to grab them.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, I'm because I've been doing mediations for 30 years now, and I do see that. I used to see men kind of coming in and saying, "Well, the relationship's over. I'm done. I've moved on already." And now I don't. It's a lot more balanced. Who's making those kind of statements? So you've talked a little bit about this about pausing, but what are the? I know you talk about three levels of connection. So
Yeah.
what are those three levels, and where does that pausing fit into that whole picture?
And sometimes people, let me say this first, and we'll get to what that is. Some people find that they stay connected in a certain way to their spouse, and one of those areas may still be functioning. One of the areas that I want to describe, though, is one that is often lost because they weren't aware of it. So let's start at the most basic. The basic level is physical connection, and which I mean loving physical contact.
Sure.
So holding hands, hugging, kissing, sex, but any of that interaction, sitting beside my spouse and patting her on the leg when I'm watching TV, that's physical connection.
Sure.
And so any of that is connecting. We share that with most other warm-blooded creatures of wanting that kind of connection. And so that piece is one that it's easy to see, when we have that. Oftentimes I watch couples struggle because they don't see it as connection as much as getting what I want, especially around sex.
Right.
And so they miss the how do we connect on this. But so physical connection as being that's one of the more basic levels, just because we share it with every other creature. Humans have this capacity, though, of language. And so my dog is sleeping beside me, and I can't ask her what she thought about last Thursday. How did she think that went? But I could sure ask my wife, and
Sure.
she could respond to me. And so our capacity of communicating in that verbal way adds another layer, and that's the next two layers in certain ways. So the next layer up is emotional connection. And emotional connection happens on the two levels. One, a feeling gotten, like my wife gets me. And if she feels that, like I get her, right? We get each other. And a lot of that is nonverbal. Like you just know you get each other and you're in sync. Then there is the support of each other. When she tells me about her bad day, I can respond in connecting ways or disconnecting ways of
Sure.
like, suck it up and move on. So that verbal allows us to connect or disconnect. And sometimes the verbal amounts to, oh gosh, or wow, that is not just beyond the nonverbal, right? So there's just that little layer, but it's our capacity of expressing that we get each other and support each other, that we are on each other's side, that's
Right.
expressed in that emotional side. Then there's the next bridge up, which takes us to the completely verbal, and that is spiritual connection. And as soon as I say that, most people go, "Oh, you're talking about religion." No, I mean, yes, that is included. You might talk about what your beliefs are, what you believe about the world and beyond the world, but it's not just that. Spiritual connection is sharing that inner part of yourself of what do you most want in life? What are you hoping for? What do you most fear in life? That deeper level. It turns out that for years, anybody who got married in 7 different locations, 7 different places of worship, had to come through my office for 3 sessions to talk to me. So I got this wide range of people who were about to get married, and I would be, and they figured they'd already beat the odds, right? Their love was going to get them through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, we all know the odds, and yet here we are
Yeah. Yeah.
signing
Yeah.
up, right? And so they would come in and they would tell me how they fell in love. And it almost always included this very long conversation that often went late into the night, somewhere not really early because it's a very vulnerable conversation, but somewhat early in their existence the relationship's existence where they went, oh, we have these similarities in perspectives, maybe background, but outlook, values, where we want to get to, and what we believe. I remember it with my wife, or now at that point girlfriend, and we probably started that conversation at 10 at night, and it probably wrapped up at 3 or 4 in the morning.
Right.
And that's the typical pattern, right? Where you share at this level where you suddenly let somebody see this deeper level of you. That's the part that most people miss. They think that's just the emotional connection. So they stop sharing what's most important to them. And those things change over time.
Right.
And if you're not talking about it, you're losing track. So you think you're on the same path, and your paths have begun to diverge further and further apart until one day you're going, wait, you want what out of life? Because I thought we were on this path.
Right.
And they both think that they've just both been on the same path until they realize they're not. So the 3 areas of physical, emotional, and spiritual. And a lot of times a couple will say, yeah, I mean, we're able to still connect physically. Sometimes it's, yeah, we still support each other. But rarely do I see a couple in trouble that are able to say that they have those 3 areas active and working on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an eye-opening consideration for anybody, whether you're thinking about getting into a new relationship or you're in one or you're trying to decide if you want to get out of one, is do you really know who that other person is? And like you say, things change because I'm thinking back. So I was divorced once, like 30 years ago. And then my second husband, I was married, my second husband passed away. But with my second husband, we did have those conversations. I'm not going to say frequently, probably not as often as we could have, but a couple of times a year, something would come up and we would just quite often, and this is horrible to say, but quite often it was when somebody passed away. It would be kind of the trigger to just kind of talk about, well, what do you see for the future? Like, what do you want to make sure we don't leave undone kind of things? So I really do think a lot of couples do. My first marriage, I know that conversation was a one and done thing. We had it and we never revisited it. Within 5 years, we were on our completely different paths. So yeah, that's so interesting to think of that. So how do you, should you actually be scheduling these kind of conversations, or should they just occur organically, or how do you see them happening?
Well, it could go either way. The problem is if you just say, well, I'll just let it be organic and it's not happening, right? That's a problem. There are lots of things in married life that if it's not happening organically, you probably need to step back and say, what do we want to do to make sure that if it's a priority for us, what do we want to do to make sure that happens? So sure, I have some friends of mine that on their anniversary, they have another conversation just annually and I had another couple that in the profession that every 5 years they actually took a retreat and they would say, are we still wanting to stay in this relationship? Now they kept answering yes because they kept having those conversations. Right. And neither one felt like that was a ultimatum as much as a let's check in, see if we're still on the same page, and if not, what do we want to do about that? So it could be scheduled. My wife and I have those conversations a lot of times because of something a show we're watching that brings up some of those issues. And we're like, what do you think about that? And so it can happen organically. If not, though, it's a good thing to say, hey, let's plan on that. Same with the emotional. There's some couples who find that and same for physical. Plenty of couples say we've got to schedule this. But some just go, well, it happens just fine. But I know couples who set a routine up for at the end of the day, before dinner time, let's just sit down and, watch the sunset and talk about our day, just something that connects them, or after dinner, or take a walk or something. But they have a moment that they have created in their organic schedule or their planned schedule where they have a chance to just say, how are you? What's going on? Yeah.
It's funny. I think back to my parents and they had a great relationship. They both passed away when I was very young, but it's really interesting because they used to do the dishes together. And that's when they used to talk about things like that. Back in the day before dishwashers, they would do the dishes together. So I do have a question though, Lee. What happens if one couple or one person in the couple recognizes that there's a problem? Like, can one person really do anything if the other person is kind of on the fence about things, or is just one of those people that just doesn't buy into the whole emotional touchy-feely stuff? How does that work if just one person wants to do something?
Yeah, so the people who are the not emotional, not touchy-feely are just as needing connection. They just maybe have a different way of understanding that. So I don't think that discounts it. The real question is whether it's sometimes one person says it's too far gone. I don't want to do anything. There's that case, and then there are the well, we're just a typical normal couple. We don't need to do anything. And both of them are problematic if you're wanting to try to work towards having a loving, safe, secure, connected relationship. And so one of the mistakes that people make is they suddenly go into chasing. So we've always had this idea of the distancer, the person who, the pursuer distancer. So I call that the chaser and the spacer, right? You're suddenly this person, I want this, and they chase after them. And the person who is the spacer flees because that's too much.
Right.
So being a pacer means that you find smaller ways of connecting. You start with a smaller piece. Instead of saying it's time for us to do date night, you might do a tag along. Hey, I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee. Would you like to come with me? It's a lot less risk to it. There's not a whole lot added to that, right? Instead of this big romantic thing, it's just, I'm getting a cup of coffee. I'm going to the bookstore. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to walk the dog. I'm going to whatever. Would you like to go along? That leaves a couple of things. One is the opportunity to easily say, no, thank you. And the other is to go, wow, this person wants me to be a part of their life, right? And so either way, and so people say, well, that didn't work. They didn't go with me. And I'm like, it still creates a warm feeling. You've engendered some connection even by making that offer. Sure. If a friend calls me and says, hey, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, would you like to go with me? I'd go, well, that was nice, regardless of whether I could go or not.
Yeah.
And so it's creating these small opportunities of reconnecting and making sure that you're not getting pulled in by your anxiety, because that will lead you to chase, but leading the process by, just trying to build these small pieces in as a change of how you typically have been working. It's intentional because you're breaking habits. You're changing your systems that you've had in place.
Yeah. And I'm guessing too that sometimes that means maybe choosing your activity, something your partner would like to do rather than something that you just, if you're really into craft shows and your spouse doesn't want to get drugged through another craft fair, maybe going to a craft fair is not the invitation you want to extend. Maybe like you say, going for a coffee or going for a walk or something might be a better option.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I mean, you don't want to create boundaries on those pieces, but to create the opportunity. So if my wife said, hey, do you want to go antiquing? I would go because I'm happy to go with her. But if we were disconnected, I'd be going, that's
your thing. Yeah.
Let's go have fun. But if she said, hey, do you want to go play pickleball? Absolutely. Let's go. It's finding a place where there's an overlap in your worlds. It's going to feel weird if my wife says, hey, let's go scuba diving. She doesn't like the ocean. She doesn't like water. Yeah. That would feel a little odd. But, if we find an overlap, then that's the better place to reconnect.
Yeah. Again, it's just those little steps sometimes. And I think there are, I've seen people who are at a place where they're just like, nope, this isn't salvageable. It's not going to work. We're not going to get back together. And they have done some of these exercises, whether they've gone to a couples retreat or whether they've just become more conscious about it. And they have turned things around. It can and it does happen. And
well, so just to speak into that, I have a lot of people who say, if you can guarantee me that I can save my marriage, then I'll do what you say. And my response is, I can guarantee you what happens if you don't take action. The only way to find out whether something is salvageable is to put in the effort. Yeah. And you get to the end of that, you at least get to say, I did what I could. I gave it my best shot. I don't have regrets over that. And that for a bare minimum, I think is a good place for people to be able to say, I really did put in the effort.
Right.
This is not how I wanted this to end, but I did the effort, as opposed to for years going, oh, could we have done something? Is there something we could have done? That regret robs us of life. And so taking the action to try it is the way to discover whether it's possible or not.
Yeah. And carrying those regrets, I think, also impacts your future relationships and how much you connect with new partners. I mean, if you're still hanging on to those vivid memories from the past of things you should have done, how much can you possibly participate in your current relationship? So,
well, and as you've probably seen the same thing I have, that people often are legally divorced, but they are not emotionally divorced.
Oh, they haven't disconnected at all. That's what I always say. If you and your co-parent are constantly still having these same disagreements you had when you're married, you're not really divorced. You're still in that same relationship. So, Lee, you have shared a ton of information, and I really appreciate the way that you structure this and frame this, because I think it's easy to understand. And it's also something that's so important for couples or people thinking about new relationships to consider. Out of all that stuff you talked about, what do you think is the most important thing?
So they go hand in hand. One is that you need to be mindful of the connection and make that a conscious part of your registering. Are we staying connected? Are we putting in the time? The other connected to that is what I think is the hallmark of a strong relationship, of having the sense that we are a team. We're in this together. We work together to take on the world. It's so easy when there's two people, especially when there's disconnection, for it to become you versus me, but working as a team to keep that connection going is what gets you there.
Yeah, great message. Lee, if people want to find out more about what you do or maybe want to reach out and work with you, what's the best way to do that?
So one of the things that's important, given what you're talking about, is being able to say, is there a possibility? And I have an assessment that is available for people. And so let me give you, it's savethemarriage.com/podcast. So you're hearing us on a podcast. So savethemarriage.com/podcast gives access to that assessment. And if you say, we're really in crisis, but I want to try, also to the Save the Marriage system or to my Unpause program, the app, people are ready to start seeing if they can unpause things and keep it moving.
Yeah, we never even got around to that. See how fast the time goes? We'll have to have you come back and talk about that, Lee.
I'd love to.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I think this is a really good message for February, for this time when people are quite often, if they've been through divorce, they're starting to think about maybe getting out into a new relationship, or as we talked about, trying to decide if they should stay in their current relationship. So thank you for sharing all your insight and wisdom.
Thank you, Marcy.
And thank you all for listening in to this episode of The D Shift. Don't forget to tune in for the next one. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.